So are we ready to start now?
I think we are ready. Yes, I'm just looking at my clock. I think we can go.
Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Rachel Bevan, so I'm Director of Statistics Division here at UN ESCAP, and it's my pleasure to be able to welcome you to today's Asia Pacific Stats Café, where we'll be looking at regional trends on forced displacement. And just a quick reminder to everyone to please stay on mute unless you're speaking. Please do also note that we are recording the session so that others can watch it afterwards as well. And as ever, as you're listening, do feel free to kind of post any thoughts of your own or questions in the chat bar as we go through. So our Stats Cafe today has been organised with our partner, UNHCR, who you can see on screen. And we've done it now to mark World Refugee Day, which took place last month, but it also marks the release of their annual statistical flagship publication called Global Trends. So we know that the number of displaced and stateless people is estimated in Asia and Pacific to be around 11.3 million at the end of last year, which is actually larger than quite a few of the countries that we actually have in our region. And that just shows you the scale of the issue that we're looking at. But I just think it's also really important as we go through this session today to remember that as we hear about lots of these issues, and particularly about the numbers, just to remind ourselves that behind every single number, there's a unique story of what's happened to that individual or to their family. And whoever they are, wherever they've come from, and whenever that has actually been, all these individuals and families have been forced to flee from war, from conflict, persecution, and they all have that right to be safe and to be treated with dignity. We know that we need reliable, timely and accessible data and evidence then to really help us to actually understand how forcible displacement and statelessness actually do affect children and their families. But it's also really important to help us to put in place then the right policies and programs to meet their specific needs. And we know that currently there's really is insufficient data about these populations. Often we haven't even got the very basic information on what their age is, their sex, and where they've come from. But this is particularly the case for internally displaced people and stateless populations. And we know somewhat more about refugees, but there's still far too many data gaps. And despite the fact that in the central transformative kind of promise of the 2030 agenda to leave no one behind, we know that we still have got these gaps, especially on forcible displacement and stateless persons, who are often the most vulnerable populations. So as we'll see from today, we're actually looking at what we can do together to really address these issues. And that's the whole point of the session today, is to bring together different partners to actually look at what is happening to address these issues. So at ESCAP, as you know, we're committed to mainstreaming gender into our statistics. And that is even at the very most basic level. That means ensuring that we have sex disaggregated data. And it's really important as well as we look at what's going on to see what progress we're making on that as well today. So we're looking forward to hearing some excellent speakers that we've got to talk about the work today, what's being done at the national level, the regional level, and international level, but also what's going on in academia. So I'm really sure that we will, as ever, have fruitful discussions. I'm not going to say any more, but I'm going to hand you over to our moderator, Tanya Sedgerson, who also works in ESCAP, and she's going to introduce the speakers. But I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say. Thank you very much. Over to you, Tanya.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Rachel. And as I very much agree with you, it's important we keep the individuals and individual stories in mind during our session today. Before we get started, if I could please ask our speaker, Asha Ahmed, to stop sharing his screen, because it means that I have to see myself in multiple versions. I don't enjoy that. So that would be really helpful if you could do that, Asha. Thank you so much. Very helpful. Okay, so as Rachel mentioned, we have an excellent lineup of speakers today. And I would like to start with my UN colleague, Chao Huang from UNHCR. He's the Statistics and Data Analysis Officer in the Regional Bureau of Asia and the Pacific, and has previously worked in Copenhagen as well. He actually has a PhD in engineering and has worked on things like disaster management as well. So Chao will give us an overview of the forced displacement trends in the region, and I give the floor to you, Chao.
Thank you, Tanya. Please allow me to share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen now with the slide?
Very clearly. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I'm going to present the UNHCR Regional Trend Report 2021. And let's start with the regional overview. So by the end of 2021, the total population of refugees, stateless persons, internally displaced persons or IDPs, and the returnees in the Asia and Pacific region is 11.3 million. It is a 15% increase compared to last year's figure, which is 9.8 million. So among these 11.3 million, we have almost 4.2 million refugees, 4.4 million IDPs, 2.4 million stateless, 1.1 million returned IDPs, and some other asylum seekers and returnees. And also, some stateless persons are also displaced, so they are double counted in two different categories, and that's why this breakup data does not match the total 11.3. Also, the 11.3 is 12% of the total forcibly displaced returnees and stateless persons worldwide. Specifically, the region of Asia Pacific is hosting 19% of the total refugees under UNHCR mandate globally. And also, the region is hosting 56% of the stateless persons globally. And if we look at the historical data, over the last decade, the overall trend in the region showed a steady increase since 2011, but you can see a spike in 2021. The IDPs has become a major population group in the region, increasing by over 130% since 2011. The non-displaced stateless population, however, has declined by 47%. From 2.3 million to 1.2 million, which is mainly due to the nationality granting in some of countries of the region. And the refugees and asylum seekers population groups remained relatively stable with average change of 5% positively or negatively. And the demographic coverage continues to improve for forcibly displaced people and other population groups. By the end of 2021, the demographic data is available for 78% of the total population groups. Among them, 76% are women and children, and 4% are elderly people above 6. Specifically, if we look at the percentage of children, among all of the displaced and the stateless population, 52 of them are children, which is almost double compared to a proportion of children in the region, where the children makes up 28% of the region's total population. Then we move to the refugees and the asylum seekers. Let's start with the country where those refugees come from. Afghanistan and Bangladesh are still the top 2 countries of origin in the region, and they are also among the top 10 countries of the region for refugees globally. Afghanistan, which is the first in the region and is the 3rd in the world, and Bangladesh is the 5th in the world. The Afghan refugee population continues to be the largest in the region and has reached to 2.7 million refugees, which was hosted by 98 countries. And Myanmar is there's a typo in the title. Actually, we are talking about Myanmar as a top country of origin. And Myanmar is the second largest country of origin of refugees in the Asia Pacific and the fifth largest in the world. And in 2021, the number of refugees reached 1.2 million, with more than 75 hosted in Bangladesh. We also have a Sustainable Development Goals indicator 1074 to measure the countries of origin with the most refugees relative to their number of inhabitants. This indicator was defined as a proportion of countries' population who became refugees, and then we have a relative term to measure this proportion. And the country that has seen the greatest proportion of national population become refugees are Afghanistan against the first one, and then Myanmar, and followed by the Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and New. Specifically, in New, it's a small population, but still there are some refugees, which makes the value for this indicator is quite high. And in this top countries of the origin for refugees. And then if we look at the countries where the refugees stayed, we will have Pakistan in our region hosting the most refugees, and Pakistan is also the fourth globally hosting refugees, followed by Bangladesh, which is the seventh globally, and Iran the 10th globally. Bangladesh is the second largest hosting country with 918,000 refugees, and in Iran there are almost 800,000 refugees. Also, we have another indicator to measure the burden of the host countries, which is called the Global Compact on Refugee or GCR Complementary Indicator, which is defined as the number of refugees among per 1,000 defect inhabitants. And then with this indicator, we can measure the refugee hosting countries in a relative term. And then surprisingly, we will find Nauru would be listed as the first country in the region, which has 88 refugees per 1,000 inhabitants, and then followed by Iran, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Malaysia. We have around 180,000 new refugees and asylum seekers in the whole year 2021. If we look at where did they go, we can see in this chart, the left is the country of origin, and the right side is the destination. Here we only have the data categorized by the regions. So the majority of the new refugees and the new asylum seekers from the countries in the region of Asia Pacific stayed within the region, including all of the forcibly displaced people from Myanmar, and around 60% out of 276,000 displaced Afghans. And some 174,000 people from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Iran, India went to Europe seeking protection. And additionally, in 2021, the region of Americas, including North Americas and the Caribbean area, the Latin Americas, received almost 12,000 applications from India and China. Then the internally displaced persons or IDPs account for more than 50% of all the forcibly displaced people in the region. And if we look back into the past 5 years, we can see the number of IDPs kept increasing. And by the end of 2021, there were 4.4 million IDPs in the region. Compared to last year, it's a 23% of increase. And we also listed the top countries with most conflict-induced IDPs, and the newly displaced IDPs in 2021 are in Afghanistan, Myanmar, and Philippines. And according to IDMC, there are also some new displaced conflict IDPs in Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. For the sorry. For stated persons, the Asian Pacific region is hosting 56% of the world's recorded stated population, and among the 2.5 million stated persons, half of them, or 1.2 million, are non-displaced stated persons, and the other half, another 1.2 million, are the displaced stated persons. And Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Thailand are the top 3 countries hosting those stateless persons. And then solutions, the availability of the durable solutions to the forcibly displaced and stateless persons improved compared to 2021. However, it remains a small fraction of the needs. For refugee returnees of voluntary repatriation in 2021, only 1,600 refugees returned to their country of origin. And for the IDP returnees, UNHCR observed 1.1 million IDP returnees, mainly in Afghanistan and Myanmar. And also for the stated persons, during the year, some 43,400 stated persons have acquired their nationality or permanent residence. Notably, in Uzbekistan, the government continues to implement the provision that granted some 32,000 stated persons the nationality of citizenship. And that's all about our regional trend report. This official report will be released on 24th of July. And for additional information, including access to the full data sets, please go to this link, which contains all of the data included in this report. Thank you, and over back to Tanya.
Thank you so much. That was a very interesting presentation, and obviously a lot of great work has gone into that. Thank you so much. And also thank you for giving us a perfect kind of bridge to our next presenter, who is Natalie Bahl. Natalia is the head of the Secretariat for the Expert Group on Refugees, IDP, and Statelessness Statistics, or also called EGRIS, a bit easier. In this capacity, she coordinates the work of the UNHCR mandated, the Statistical Commission mandated group to support the implementation of statistical recommendation on refugees, IDPs, and related population groups, and also to develop international recommendations on statelessness. And she's going to give us an update on EGRIS work and on the international recommendations on statelessness statistics. So I will give you the floor, Natalia. Thank you. Oh, and can I just give a quick reminder, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the chat box and we'll try to get to them at the end. We should have a little bit of time. Thank you. Over to you, Natalia. We can see your screen, but it's not in presentation mode.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Yes, I'm just trying to address that. For some reason it's not responding. Is this better now?
Kind of, yes.
Okay, it's full screen for me.
You look like you're, yeah, it looks like you're sharing your screen and not the presentation.
Show me.
I can see your screen as well as the next slide.
Okay. Whilst my colleague sorts out the presentation, thank you, Karis. Just to say thank you very much, Tanya, and to UNESCAP and organisers of this session for inviting EGRIS to join. It's a pleasure to be part of regional dialogues as well as global events with more of a kind of global scope and global participation. So it's a real pleasure to be invited to this session today. During my presentation, oh, I see there's lots of changes being made here to my computer settings. Good. During my presentation, I wanted to give you a short overview of three different things. Essentially, first of all, an overview of the expert group, as Tanya referred to us already as EGRIS, the Expert Group on Refugee, IDP and Statelessness Statistics. This will give a little bit of a background and overview of membership and our mandate from the UN Statistical Commission. I wanted to share with you, and this might already be familiar to some of you who are already existing members of the group, some insights into the content of the refugee and IDP recommendations. Please let me know if you can see the screen better now.
You can see your
Tanya?
screen, but it is still coming up where we basically can see what you're supposed to be seeing, like your presentation
Maybe
as well
share
as
it
the
from
next slide.
your computer and I'll just speak. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Pim, could you pull it up from
I
our
think
side?
Karis will pull it up for us on her computer.
Karis will do it. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I know I can't see you, but this is fine. Okay. Apologies.
Perfect. Thank you, Cherry.
Yeah. No, I just can't see anything. Okay. Right. So first of all, I want to give you an overview of the group and insight into the existing recommendations on refugee and IDP statistics. And thirdly, I wanted to present to you a little bit more about the priorities of our current mandate that takes us up until, sorry, typo there, 2024. But a focus of the priorities that what we're working on at the moment during 2022. So the presentation will cover these three topics. And as mentioned, we have many members who are from and working in the Asia Pacific region. So apologies if some of this is already familiar to a number of you, but it's a little bit the nature of the beast, since we are a group with quite a large country and regional membership. Next slide, please. So first of all, why did we need an expert group? So Chow has already presented on some of the data that UNHCR has recently or will be soon publishing on the regional statistics on forcibly displaced persons, and so he knows better than many how challenging it is to put together that data, primarily and in many cases because of the variety of different sources, definitions, approaches that are used to produce data on these different population groups. So before EGRIS was established back in 2016, there were no statistical recommendations, frameworks, common definitions for refugees, IDPs, and other associated population groups. So there was an identified need to address that gap in a kind of normative statistical sense, to help develop or to develop international recommendations addressing these population groups worldwide. It is also the case that given what I've mentioned before, and given the, if you like, the nature of responses to many forced displacement situations that often develop quite rapidly, as I think we saw recently in Afghanistan and elsewhere in Asia Pacific region. Much of the available data on these population groups comes from what might be called operational data sources. So data sources produced for operational decision making, for operational data needs, often produced by humanitarian agencies, and not necessarily, given the nature of the decisions they're aiming to inform, not necessarily following the principles of official statistics, and in many cases not necessarily connected to, built into national statistical systems. So there were these two gaps, the conceptual normative gap, but also the kind of operational coordination gap that contributes to the challenge of producing statistics on these population groups. This led to, within the statistical community, increased support and interest within the context of the UN Statistical Commission to address this gap, and of course hand in hand with the broader political interest that rapidly increased during 2015, 2016, but I would say has continued since then worldwide to start to work much more coherently with governments and with development partners to address this issue globally. Next slide, please. The expert group on refugee, IDP and statelessness statistics it currently consists of 52 country members and 28 regional and international organizations. So I myself and my colleague who you just saw on the screen and a few others are make up the secretariat of the group, and we're hosted by UNHCR, but we're representing a much broader group of, as I say, 52 different country members and 28 different regional and international organizations. The group has a mandate from the UN Statistical Commission, which currently will take us up until the end of 2024. And we also have a steering committee consisting of the 13 members that you see on your screen there who provide steering for the group. It's not so much a governance body, of course, we're reporting to the Statistical Commission itself, but help to steer the group in the interim to guide the work and help achieve our terms of reference. It's really important for us to highlight, it's really important for me, but for us more broadly, to highlight the membership of our group, not because it's broad in itself, but because we have a very participatory methodology for how we work on different deliverables and areas of work within the group. So we make efforts and help to try to facilitate engagement from the members. So it's not so much it's an active group, it's an active membership, and we expect members to be active and to contribute to the development of recommendations, to contribute to the development and delivery of trainings. So it's a very kind of participatory approach that we pursue. Next slide, please. As mentioned, we were set up in 2016, and since then we are in our third successive mandate. The first one from 2016 to 18 really focused on the development of international recommendations on refugee statistics. The second, that took us to 2020, focused on the second set of recommendations that looked at internal displacement. And the third mandate that we're currently bang in the middle of will take us up until the end of 2024. And this has our mandate has broadened quite considerably and changed in nature to focus on essentially promoting and supporting the implementation of the recommendations. I'll come back to a little bit of some of our activities and priorities at the moment, but the overall kind of thrust of our current mandate is really supporting implementation at country level of the recommendations and promoting their use. We have also recently added to our mandate the development of a third set of recommendations on statelessness statistics, and given the particular relevance of this topic to Asia Pacific region, as Chow has just highlighted, over half of the world's estimated stateless populations are currently residing in Asia Pacific region. I'll share a little bit about this process a little bit later in my presentation. Next slide, please. So briefly, what is in the recommendations on refugee and IDP statistics? And these are two different publications. The cover of each you can see there, both accessible on our website and on well, various different websites, but most easily accessible through our own. Each of these that they are aligned with each other, but they're distinct and separate publications. Each one provides for the first time, a statistical framework on the associated populations. So one on refugees and asylum seekers and other linked populations, and the other on internal displacement and those related to internal displacement. It provides definitions of core terminology, of statistical classifications according to the various population groups that fall within their scope. Each set of recommendations also provides guidance on a basic tabulations and indicators that should be produced or that ideally should be produced on these population groups. They provide an analysis or an assessment of how data sources can be used or improved to include these population groups within them, looking at both traditional but also non-traditional data sources in some cases. They provide a kind of thematic focus on the case for refugees, looking at refugee integration and how to measure integration and well-being. And on the IDPs, a slightly different language, but an overlapping conceptual issue, looking at how to measure progress towards durable solutions, or how best to measure the displacement-related vulnerabilities that affect IDP populations. There is a connection with more explicitly in the IDP recommendations than in the refugee recommendations, purely because of timing and publications, timing of each publication, but there is an explicit link to recommended priority SDG indicators, so a selection of 12 indicators from the broader SDG framework that are particularly pertinent to forcibly displaced populations. To provide guidance to countries interested in including these populations in their SDG monitoring. And lastly, but definitely not least, each set of recommendations provides tailored and practical guidance or recommendations around statistical coordination, looking at both national, regional, but also to a certain extent international level coordination. Next slide, please. In summary, and generalizing to a certain degree, because I'm trying to pull out the similarities between the two sets of recommendations, given it's a short time for the presentation, the core recommendations of the core kind of learning or key messages that I'd like you to take away from the recommendations, and encourage you to go and have a look at the recommendations to read more, are the following. I mean, first of all, use of the common definitions. So providing statistical definitions, as I mentioned, for the first time endorsed internationally, and encouraging countries to and other stakeholders to have a look at these and take heed. Implementing those statistical frameworks, both on refugees and IDPs, as is dictated to be relevant given the country context, is really a key message. So making use of those, but most importantly, doing that through clearly identified responsibilities and coordination mechanisms within national statistical systems. So the whole kind of thrust and guidance of the recommendations is to focus on statistical inclusion. So looking at opportunities that different data sources in different countries may present to enhance inclusion. Looking at principles of do no harm throughout the statistical production process, and then importantly looking at opportunities for longer term change and for sustainable change. For example, looking at the inclusion of these population groups within, for example, national strategies for the development of statistics. Next slide, please. As mentioned, our current mandate, our previous mandates were more normative in terms of developing these recommendations collaboratively with our members. Once those were both endorsed by the Commission, we have now been focusing on trying our best to monitor implementation, to take stock from here in the Secretariat, the information we can access through our membership and beyond, in terms of how countries and institutions are making use of the refugee and the IDP recommendations. This small data visualization here is from our annual report for 2020 to 2021. So it's essentially, we identified 52 different examples, including 20 at country level, kind of concrete examples of use of the recommendations, either the refugee, IDP, or both. We are continuously monitoring here in the Secretariat and look forward, or we're expecting, given what we're aware of is already going on in many parts of the world, we're expecting this number to significantly increase in 2022 and hopefully also in 2023, primarily, of course, because of the impact of the COVID pandemic, meant that many data collections were either delayed, postponed, or cancelled during the 2020-2021 period, and many of those are now, picking up, whether we're looking at national census or other national surveys, for example, in many countries that are either ongoing now in 2022 or planned for next year. Next slide, please. For those 20 cases that I mentioned, 20 examples that we identified that are being implemented at country level and through national statistical systems. This is the geographic coverage of those 20. And I think you'll notice already that there's a large gap in the Asia Pacific region. This is not to say that this either indicates that we in the Secretariat just don't know about activities that have taken place during this period and aren't aware of them, and in which case please do let us know. We'd be very interested to hear, or it could mean that there's less awareness of and uptake of the recommendations in the region, and very much a reason we were happy to be invited to join this session today. It's something we'd like to explore further with all of you. That's not to say that there is no use of the recommendations in the region. In the next slide, there's a short summary of the activities that we're aware of that are ongoing. Some in earlier stages than others, making use of either the IDP or the refugee recommendations in different contexts. I should just mention here that in the context of Afghanistan, sorry, with the change of slide sharing, that the heat survey there has actually changed its name, has now been replaced by a different rapid household assessment survey in the context of Afghanistan, but also making use of the indicators that are recommended for looking at internal displacement in the recommendations. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Natalia, but I have to ask you to wrap up sooner.
Yeah, I'll wrap up
Thank
just
you.
with one minute on the statelessness recommendations, just to highlight those. In our current mandate that takes us to 2020-24, we are focused, as I mentioned before, on supporting implementation of the refugee and IDP recommendations, but we're also in the process of developing statelessness recommendations. If you go to the next slide, Karis, please. And the next one again. And the next one again. This is a process that will hopefully come to a conclusion in March 2023, when the final draft of the recommendations on statelessness statistics will be discussed and hopefully endorsed by the UN Statistical Commission. But I wanted to highlight that this is a process that's been going on since 2019, with a huge amount of participation and contributions from countries in the Asia Pacific region, and so we're very happy with those contributions and look forward to those continuing. I just wanted to flag to everyone in this group who may not be aware that this is very much ongoing now, and we are open to feedback and further contributions, and anyone who's interested to be more involved and engaged in that process can feel free to contact either myself or my colleague Karis in due course. So with that, and apologies for the technical challenges early on in the presentation, I'd just like to say thank you once again, and very happy to answer any questions that may come up.
Thank you so much, Natalia, and it's very nice to see this presentation, all the work that has been going on, and I'm also very happy that you highlight that it would be great to see more of this kind of work in Asia and the Pacific. I can see, we have almost 70 people here today, and it's in the middle of July, so there's definitely interest in Asia Pacific, so it's great to see. And now we will go to a couple of presentations that are focusing more on what's happening at the country level, and I must admit that that's something that I very much look forward to. First, we will have our speaker, Asha Ahmed, who is the Identity Management Specialist at NADRA, or the National Database and Registration Authority in Pakistan. He has several decades of experience in project management within NADRA, also with UNHCR, and actually he has experience not just from Pakistan, but also from Kenya and Sudan. He has done a lot of work on the Afghan citizen card in Pakistan. So very much look forward to your presentation, Asha, and you'll be presenting of the Afghan refugee registration statistics in Pakistan. Over to you. And we can see your screen. It's not in presentation mode yet.
Perfect. Thank you very much. This is Ashrama. Thanks, Natija, for the introduction. So straight away I will take you to my presentation. This is all about the Afghan registration statistics that we are doing with UNHCR in last 2 decades. I will start with a brief introduction of my organization. That's NADRA, what we have done in terms of the nationality of Pakistan. So in total, we are 220 million of population. Out of them, any person who is beyond of 18 years of age, then he is liable to take the ID card. So till date, we have produced some 135 million national ID cards. Out of them, 55% are men and 44.8 are women. Identities, like I said, that after 18 is 135, and between newborn to the age of 18, we produce CRC, that we call Child Registration Certificate. So in total, we have issued 186 million identities in last 2 decades. Out of them, the major portion is ID card, then CRC, that's I just referred, and then refugees that we are registering with collaboration of UNHCR in Pakistan. That is now up to 4.5 million. We are like the technical giant in the technical arm of the government of Pakistan. So we are maintaining the facial image gallery of 130 million images with the matching capacity of 40 million matches per second. And we are also maintaining the second largest biometric gallery around the globe. We are holding some 1.2 billion fingerprints with a matching capacity of 55 million matches per second. So that was about registration statistics. The documents that we have been issuing is the National ID Card 135 on my left is a proof of registration for Afghan refugees that we are working with UNHCR since 2006, and series of products we have launched in last 15 years. And then on the right side, you can see that National ID Card for Pakistanis, that's a smart card that we started in year 2011. Then we also produce National ID Card for overseas Pakistanis who are the Pakistani experts living abroad. Then the person origin card, this is being issued to the people who are the national where dual nationality is not accepted. So they have to send the Pakistani national citizenship and to attain the second, rather for their first. So that was about, and then on the last corner, we have the image of the PO card that we recently produced for Afghan refugees in 2021. So you see that's in last presenters have given their thoughts on it. So we are the 4th largest refugee hosting country in the globe, Pakistan. And you see, and back in early 2000, we were actually the largest refugee hosting, because from 1979, the influx was in Pakistan, and we kept on hosting it. From 2006, we started registration of them. So I will just give a glow that what services that government of Pakistan have extended to with the support of international development partners and UNHCR particularly. So they have the access to the banks, they can operate their accounts, they can, like telcos services are available for them. They can avail the law enforcement services, other government entities. You see, they have the fair access for the schools, private and public, same for the hospitals, our universities. They have the certain quota. And yes, UNHCR is maintaining, with the support of government of Pakistan, voluntary repatriation of the centers on our border sites with Afghanistan. Let me add one thing, that we have some 1,500 kilometer border, western border with Afghanistan. This is huge. So that was all about that the background. Now I will talk particularly about the exercise, that the drive document renewal and information verification exercise that NADRA undertook as a technical implementation partner with support of government of Pakistan, Chief Commissioner of Afghan Refugees, and UNHCR, of course. So the current features of that card, that's the next generation ID card. We call it because we are using that smart card. We are keeping Afghan refugees right in part of national ID card. We used to acquire, and we are storing the latest biometrics of all of the refugees. And the core purpose of this exercise was to development of the socio-economic profile. Joaquin, that's our director, just mentioned that the reliable and statistical data is very important in this. So our target when we started back in March 21, so pure status holders were 1.4 million and card holders were 1 million. So the gap of 0.4 is actually the children who are age of less than 5. We print their information on the backside of their parents' card, and we are maintaining from a single source of truth. The infrastructure that we deployed for 10 months, we had 40 nationwide registration complexes and 8 and 10 mobile registration vans to cover the minute pockets. And in totality, we have some 350 interview desks from where we carried out the interview for 1.4 million funds. The duration was April 21 to February 22. We recently concluded 10 months, the whole duration, and COVID had the implication. I will discuss that how we tackled that. And then the card expiry of that card is 30th June 2023, which is extendable, of course. So stakeholders that are involved in the exercise, I said Ministry of Saffron, Government of Pakistan, NADRA as the technical arm, and then UNHCR Pakistan. So our target population was, again, I mentioned 1.4 million of our refugees who were holding proof of registration with an expiry date of December 2015. Because it's the third generation card that we are issuing them. From 2006, we have conducted some 3 exercises of the registration and re-verification. We are also the data recording. We are also registering the unregistered family members of the nuclear family of Afghan refugees who are living in Pakistan. You see, so we are connecting them on a single source of truth. Our objectives for this exercise was to have improved more data, and then to issue a new legally recognized documentation, because initially the card had the expiry of 2015. They had some challenges, and then again the support for the program delivery. Excuse me. Sorry. This is a very that output of the exercise. So we came across the 308,000 families, and the individuals that we have registered is 1.28 million, including children who are age under 5. The number of cards that we delivered in 10 months is the 96%. Over 950,000 cards have been distributed to the refugees from the same centers within the cycle of 20 days. And then the pending delivery is 4%, and we have constituted some 11 nationwide centers where they can take their card, and we have some integrated SMS system to enable to inform them to collect their card. So if we see that chart in between, the pure conversion is that the pure card holders who just got the new pure card after the validation checks and after giving the more enriched data. Child to pure 173. The children who were under age of 5 and in 21 they were above age of 5, then we took their latest biometrics and we issued a new pure card. The number is the same that we issued right in 2006 and subsequently during their registration. Newborn registration that we just concluded is 266,000 within that 10 months of the operation. And then UMRF recording, UMR referring to unregistered members of registered families, 136,000 individuals have been registered in this category. How we handled that was a peak period of probably the second wave of the COVID, and how we handled it, we had the capacity right from the very first day of March 21, but we divided, we managed the way that we processing intake were on the 30 to 50%, depending on the positivity ratio within that city. So we had that connection with our national command center, from where we're getting about the city's information. Accordingly, we designed and processing capacity versus intake, we managed that, and then we applied all across COVID protocols, because in totality 100,000 staff members from UNHCR, NADRA and Government of Pakistan, they were right on the field. So we managed in a way that COVID protocol was rightly implemented. We used to conduct the regular PCR of all of the staff members, like you see, but the SOP is that if anyone got found positive in the center, so the same day all staff member has to test, appear for the PCR, and 2 days the center will be closed for 2 days, and then we were doing it efficiently because of the efficient and effective communication by UNHCR between all stakeholders. The lower side of the graph, you see monthly processing strength. That will actually show that how we manage the processing capacity versus intake. You see, for in initial March, April, May, June until July, we were under par. We were operating on 40% of the capacity that we are holding. Afterwards, the situation was a bit lenient in terms of positivity ratio. Then we scaled up. And we added the more capacity even in month of September, October to counter that gap. And eventually by end of December 21, I'm sorry. So by end of December 21, we were able to meet the target by 85%. And then we gave the additional 2 months for the people who were still unprocessed. So here is a preliminary analysis of what actually we got from that. So if you see the breakdown by gender is 47% women and 53% men is the same ratio that we just saw in my first slide about the Pakistani national proportion. The important thing is like the children between 0 to 17 is actually, you see, is more than 50%. You see, so that's and within this region in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, the ratio is same all across. So international development partners and governments should take that importantly. And then above age of 60 is 4%, and we are recording all other things. Ethnic profiles, that of majority is Pashtuns, 86%, and then Tajiks, Uzbek, Baloch, other Hazaras, and Turkmen. And we are keeping that maintaining that single source of growth in terms of recording of socioeconomic profiles. If you see, the return intention is only 19%. Probably the current security situation in Afghanistan, 81% wants to live within this country. If you see in the demographics, so we are divided principally in the 5 provinces. The western province is our KPK, that's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, that's holding around 60% of the more than 60% of the Afghan refugees. And then UNHCR, of course, other development partners have the interventions in that region. And then the southwestern province is that Balochistan, that's holding more than 300,000. Then our central province is Punjab, where the economic opportunities are too much. So people are the Afghan refugees are migrating for the economic reasons to the Punjab, central Punjab. And then Sindh, our western southern province, that we are holding there 21,000. Then Islamabad is our capital, and AJK is close to our capital. So you see the drive. You see that D percentage and ANR is like ANR is Afghan National Registration, the database that we are maintaining since 2001, and drive is just that we updated in year 21. So ratio, you see, we can see the 5% from KP has moved to Punjab and Sindh. You see that we are following. Again, I will refer to that comment of the first presentation by a director, Statistics Division, that reliable and statistical data. You see, so that reliability that we are getting through these exercises, that UNHCR is putting their efforts, and NADRA and other stakeholders are putting in terms of technical infrastructure to get it. So RVs and non-outside RVs, if we see the ratio is almost same, 70%. Yeah.
Asha, I'm going to ask. I need to ask you to wrap up fairly soon. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was regarding. I cannot go. Okay. The other important thing is birth registration comparison that we recently concluded with registration of 266,000 compared to 330,000 in 2010, because in last 10 years we are operating with pure card notification centers where Afghan refugees can always come and can register their newborn children. And then UMRF, the registered members, that's a ratio is same comparatively. If we see the number of years that's been given the opportunity on them. I will take a quick round of the data snapshots, and then the last slide is important. So when I talked about the socioeconomic profiles, so we are recording their education, and I will just quick round the special needs. You see, that was important. Then skill set, how they are earning here, because they are living in from last 20-30 years here. There is a comparison between monthly income and the source of income. You see, so majority are the daily wages labor, and then the small businesses ownership. You see, then financial assistance and abroad, they're getting remittances from abroad. Occupation, you see students, because I have said that they have the fair access to education institutions, and then the drivers are there, manual laborers are there, housewives, yes, they are there. Intentions to return versus skills. So you see that labor, tailor, daily wages, driving are the potential skilled holders, and in a good number that can be that they can move back to the Pakistan, Afghanistan. So here's another important, is a way forward. So we are not closing it just by doing one exercise, but we are operating with 11 pure card modification centers where we will be updating, continuous updating of the drive data to have the real-time information of all of the refugees, and then record documentation of the vital events. And we're also starting the issuance of family information certificates for the unregistered members of registered families. And those who have been left over in drive exercise, they will have the opportunity to proceed. So that was all about from my side. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting. And sorry if I had to ask you to copy a bit shorter, but it was very interesting and nice to see kind of the operational side a little bit as well. And obviously a lot of efforts happening. So now we've heard from, international organizations, we've heard from Pakistan, and the last presentation is from a couple of academics, so it's a nice different angle to get in. And this is from Jakob Bijak, who is a professor of statistical demography at the University of Southampton. And he has over 20 years work experience in academia and international civil service. And his colleague Jason Hilton will be joining us as well, and he's a lecturer in social statistics and data science, also at the University of Southampton. And they will be looking at another country in our region, Iran, and they've done some demographic modeling on the situation there. So in the interest of time, I will go directly to the two of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go on, yeah.
No, I was just going to say that Jason will be presenting because he led on this piece of work. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and thank you for inviting us today to present. It's great to be able to talk to you all. So hang on while I just share my screen. Can everyone see that okay?
It's perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay. So yes. So this work was conducted by myself and Jakob, and also my colleague Stephen Gao, who must have a large part of the credit for this. He did a lot of the work as well. But we're part of a group at the University of Southampton within the Centre for Population Change, and we have a wealth of expertise in conducting demographic estimation and probabilistic forecasting. So we were very pleased to be able to participate in this project. So we were commissioned by the UNHCR Global Data Service to attempt to develop some methodologies to try and fill some of the gaps that have been mentioned around refugee statistics. In particular, one of the largest refugee groups, together with the one that we heard about in the last presentation, in Pakistan, are Afghan refugees in Iran. And historically, one of the issues with this group is that although we have reported totals on the number of refugees registered in particular years, we don't have deep information on the age and sex breakdown of those refugees. And that was the problem that we were attempting to address. So we are attempting to estimate demographic information for Afghan refugees in Iran during the last 20 years or so. And the project as such had two phases. So the first was that we were interested in assessing the available data sources. And as part of that, we were interested in trying to identify the exits and the entries to the target population. So if you think about it, we have a population of registered refugees in Iran. We know that people can enter that population by either new refugees entering Iran, which happily for the period we're looking at, the problem was made a little bit easier because there are very few new registrations in Iran because of there were a few new registrations anyway. We also know that people can be born into the refugee population. We also wanted to identify exits from the refugee population. So these would be outward migrations, returns to Afghanistan, and also exits by through mortality. Once we completed this phase, we were also then the next phase was to go on to do some modelling with the aim of estimating the age and sex profile of these refugees. We adopted a stochastic cohort component projection approach, whereby we took information that we had about the age and sex structure from a particular year where we did have good information. We used some information that we had on the components of demographic change, so these flows that constitute exits and entries to our target population that we're attempting to estimate. And we combined these with the reported totals, where we knew the total number of refugees for particular years, so for 2015 and for 2020. And so what we were trying to do here was we were trying to come up with a plausible path for demographic change between 2006 and 2021 that was consistent with all of this information that we had. So with the starting population, with what we knew about the components of demographic change, and with the total number of refugees that were reported for 2015 and 2020. So I'm going to start by talking about some of the data that fed into the modelling, and then the next phase of the presentation will talk about the model itself and the outputs from that model. So our starting point then were reported refugee totals from the 2006 census. So we were able to get access through this from the Integrated Public Use Microdata Service, which gives us microdata on 1% sample of the Iranian census for that year. And this enabled us to have an age-sex breakdown of the population of Afghans in Iran during 2006. And we can compare this here to the age-sex breakdown of the Iranian population resident in Iran. So you can see that we have one of the difficulties of estimating this population is that it has a different age-sex structure, not just from the population of Iranians native to Iran, but also to the population in Afghan itself. So it's a very distinct population which is selected from the overall population in Afghanistan. So we can't make too many assumptions about the age structure before we start. So that was our starting point. We also had some information on reported Afghan refugees in Iran. So this is the time series of the stock, so the number of refugees in Iran. So we're going from 1980 here forward to 2020. We can see there was a big increase during the 1980s that correspond to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and then we have a slight decline afterwards when we have some returnees, and we have similarly some returnees during the period after the American invasion of Afghanistan. And I do think when you look at time series like this, it really does bring forward the point that Rachel was making in the introduction about the human stories that go behind some of this data. However, what we do know about this data is that not all the data points here represent complete reported totals. So some of them are sort of minimal updates from previous totals that were reported by the Iranian government. So we know that in particular 2015 and 2020 are points that we can rely on as representing the top line total number of refugees in Iran. So they represent the targets that we're attempting to hit with our projection. So we have a starting population, and we have some targets that we know that our projection needs to be consistent with in order for us to come up with a plausible path for population change. We also know something about the returnees, so people who left who left Iran to return to Afghanistan. So we have here the time series of the recorded number of refugees. And we can see that there are very large numbers following the 2001 invasion, and this dropped off after 2006 when the security situation deteriorated a little bit in Afghanistan. However, this did raise some questions around the data. So we know that basically what we seem to find here was that the registration data, so the data from this previous time series here, and the data on the number of returns seem to be inconsistent. So we had a number of returnees during the period 2004 and 2006, which was larger than the starting population in 2003, but we still had a reported relatively large number of refugees remaining in the population in 2006. So these three elements didn't seem to be consistent. So for that reason, we were sort of concentrating on the period after 2006 during this project. So we've talked about starting population, some constraints we need to hit, and one of the ways in which people can leave the population of Afghan refugees in Iran. We also know that people travel onward from Iran to seek refuge elsewhere, so for instance in Europe and other areas of the world. And we also have some data to help us understand the pattern of these resettlements through time. And the data that we used for this was Eurostat data. So what we have here is the time series of refugee applications in Europe by Afghan nationals, and we can see there was a large peak in 2015 and 2016 that correspond to the large number of arrivals we had from many different nationalities during that period. So what this allows us to do, this data from Eurostat, is to have some assumptions and some prior information about the age and time structure of exits from the population in Iran that will feed into our model. And the final piece of the puzzle we needed here was some assumptions about fertility and mortality. So this was estimated from the census microdata that I was talking about previously. For fertility, we followed the work of Abbasi Shavazi, who is one of the authorities on the Afghan refugee population in Iran. And we find here that we have a declining but above replacement fertility for this population. If you look at the chart on the right here, we can see the age profile of fertility for Afghans in Iran and for Iranians in Iran. So we can see that the curve here is very much higher for Afghans. But the interesting thing here is fertility is lower for Afghan refugees than it is for the Afghan general population who have remained in Afghanistan. And the fact that this fertility is above replacement implies a growing population without any, if we didn't see any net migration. For mortality, we use some indirect methods in order to calculate the difference between the mortality that Afghan refugees experience compared to the mortality amongst the general Iranian population. And we assumed that this differential remained constant over time. So putting these pieces together enabled us to produce some constrained projections. And this, as a natural consequence of this, we ended up with a plausible set of age and sex structures for our refugee population. So this time series on the right shows the estimated total number of refugees, Afghan refugees in Iran. So we have our starting point in 2006, which was taken from the census. And we have some initial growth. We have one of our targets here in 2015 where we know the total number of refugees. And you can see that our projection goes through this target in 2015 and also through the target in 2020. So that shows that we're able to build this dynamic population projection that hits the observed totals and is consistent with our prior information on returnees, on fertility, on mortality, and on onward movement to Europe. I won't talk too much about the estimation process here, but the output of this is some nice information on the estimated an estimated plausible set of age, sex, population structures for the Afghan refugee population. So this is a population pyramid here with our estimates. So we have the oldest line is this orange one here, and as the colors move from orange towards pink, we go forward in time. One of the things that we might notice here is that we see that the population who are sort of in the ages around 15 or 20 decline quite rapidly, mostly due to outward movement from the population. So just to summarize then, so we have yes, we know from the census data that the wider Afghan population is growing, but the official refugee population declines. I didn't really talk about that, so apologies. Our population projection indicate that we can produce some plausible age structures for the population in 2020, but we have to be aware that we require some strong priors and some strong assumptions to be able to estimate this model. And the set of assumptions that we have to make are here. We have to be a little bit aware here that the estimates of uncertainty are given, so those sort of shaded areas are conditional on these model assumptions. And also there may be other sets of assumptions that could also be defensible and may lead to different outcomes. So I will wrap up there. Apologies for keeping you a little bit longer, but yes, I'm very happy to receive any questions if there's some time.
Thank you so much. I thought that was a very interesting presentation and really some of the different aspects than the other presentations we heard. As you mentioned, we have run out a bit of time, and for me, it has been a little bit like cafe with a good friend. Like, it's really enjoyable. So I've been reluctant to stop the presentations because they've been super interesting. I would encourage everyone, because we don't have time for an interactive session and questions and answers, if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and we will try and facilitate with the speakers to respond to them. We have been through a really interesting set of different presentations. I must admit, I very much like your very funky population pyramid there at the end. It has very beautiful colors. It's very nice. But also, thank you so much for highlighting all the constraints of this type of estimation and modeling for these populations. It was very insightful. It was also really nice to hear from our speaker from Pakistan and some of the more kind of operational experiences and how this actually works in practice on the ground. I think that was very helpful for all of us. Of course, the global work and the regional overview is what I'm personally more familiar with, but it was nice to see that again. And also huge congrats to our UNHCR colleagues on the very soon launch of the report. I'm sure everyone looks forward to have a close look at that. As always, the presentations and also the recording of today will be available online. A huge thanks to all of our participants today. We had quite a few of you, and I see a huge cohort from Malaysia. So thanks to our colleagues from Dozen for joining. My apologies again for running slightly over time. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box for the next few hours, and we'll facilitate that you get the response to those. And I know we're all scattered along different time zones, so I hope you all have a good day ahead, or a nice evening, or whatever it is for you, and maybe even a nice summer. Take care, everyone, and thank you so much to all our speakers again. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.